begin with this Fox News alert. Senator Tim Scott has hit back at the left while facing attacks for saying America is not a racist country. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus on this Friday. The controversy exposing two vastly different visions for America as the president is calling for an expansion of the federal government and rooting out what he calls systemic racism that plagues America. And he's plowing ahead with massive tax and spending proposals, as you know. The Wall Street Journal now calling it cradle to grave big government, saying President Biden's latest plan rejects the old social contract of work for benefits. However, Senator Tim Scott says more Americans of all backgrounds will reject the controlling doctrine of the left, and that Democrats are fighting bigotry with more bigotry by calling him slurs like Uncle Tim. Meanwhile, President Biden is being asked about Scott's assertion that America is not a racist country. I want to bring in now Gianno Caldwell, Fox News political analyst, and Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor. Biden and GOP push, competing visions for America. Look, Gianno, not both visions can be perfect for the country. They're very different. So who's getting it right?
Well, Senator Scott certainly, in my view, is getting it right, and it just exposes what we saw, the reaction from many individuals on the left of the racism that exists in the Democratic Party. And truthfully speaking, people have said the greatest trick that Satan ever pulled was making people believe that he didn't exist. And I would argue the greatest trick the Democrats ever pull is making people believe that racism doesn't exist in their party. And we're seeing echoes of it time and time again. White supremacy, Uncle Tim, Uncle Tom, without those leaders within the Democratic Party saying, stop it, that's enough. He's a black man. He's entitled to having his opinion. This continues to happen. It's happened to me many times. I've been called just an Uncle Tom just today on my social media feed. This is something that has to stop. We need policies. We need to bring back the Trump-era policies, which wasn't about dependency. We saw the lowest unemployment rates among Hispanics at 3%, lowest for blacks at 5%. And it wasn't because of welfare programs. It was because people had the opportunity to work. Those are the programs that keep people moving and pushes this country forward.
You know, Gianno, I'm glad that you brought in a real quick personal experience, because I think people of color today who maybe don't agree politically can say that we do share some of what we're seeing in social media right now. And Leslie, you and I follow each other on different platforms, and I've been telling friends, just don't look at my feed right now. And I don't say much of anything, but what's in there right now is, I mean, it is hate, Leslie. Why are we finding members of the left in particular glomming onto this issue in such a negative way?
I think, quite frankly, and obviously I'm not an African American, I don't know what it's like. I know I get nervous when I see blue lights, but I don't have that fear that I hear from my African American friends, coworkers, colleagues, and those people who, you know, talk to me on the radio or online. But I have to say what Gianno is saying, and quite frankly what Senator Tim Scott is saying, I think proves the point of what the president and some in my party are saying. Those in my party aren't saying that racism only exists within the Republican ranks. They're saying that racism exists in America today, and that we have to erase that racism. We have to work together to do that, because the fact that in 2021 we're still hearing people like Gianno or anyone, any person of color being called Uncle Tom or the N-word, as Senator Scott says he has. The fact that Senator Scott has been pulled over 7 times, would that happen if he was a white man, I think proves the point that there is a problem with racism. And I think when you look at the slogans on the T-shirts, January 6th, and when you see these posts, there is racism left or right. It's not just about political party.
So
it's
that's the point I wanted to get to.
About political party.
So,
it's about a problem of racism that still exists in America today.
So what we're seeing among, and I really appreciate where you started there, that your perspective is based on those you talk to, and you don't make any assumptions about any of us. I've known you for years, Leslie. Not everybody, though, deals with it that way from your side of the aisle. And therein lies the rub, right? Because I will not be explained to about racism when I actually have felt it and know what the real thing feels like and what the manipulated thing feels like. Liberal host Joy Behar gives us a little bit of a window inside of what I'm saying. She suggests that Senator Scott doesn't know the meaning of systemic racism. So she's going to try and explain it. Okay, let's watch. I just, I don't want to go too far afield here, but let's just remind everybody where she's been on the issue of race. She admitted wearing blackface at Halloween a number of years ago. So she's had her own journey. Giano, is she hitting any notes that make sense to you in that?
Well, first, quickly to respond to Leslie. Leslie, I and Tim Scott and Harris and others have agreed that racism does exist in the country. Now, to speak to Joy, when she says systemic racism exists, I may happen to agree. And I agree that it exists in Joe Biden's 94 crime bill. Democratic policies continued to push. You talk about Jim Crow laws from the 1870s to 1964. We saw a Democratic policy pushed which marginalized African Americans, systemic racism, 94 crime bill, systemic racism. Dodd-Frank, I would argue, is systemic racism, putting a lot of black banks out of business, which black folks happen to depend on to get mortgages and loans, which Dodd-Frank pushed those folks out of business. So there's a number of elements that I can agree with. It just happens to be that Democrats continue to push these policies and think that it's for the benefit of African Americans. Dependency is not for the benefit of African Americans. Independence is for the benefits of African Americans.
Okay, we'll move to this. Well put, Giano. The culture wars are picking up, if you hadn't noticed. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and 37 Republican senators are calling on the Biden Education Department to block a planned proposal which invokes the 1619 Project. That's an effort to reframe America's history. McConnell said this: Americans do not need or want their tax dollars diverted from promoting the principles that unite our nation toward promoting radical ideologies meant to divide us. Americans never decided our children should be taught that our country is inherently evil. Leslie, what's your response?
When I was growing up 20 minutes from Plymouth, Massachusetts, and I would visit there every year for a field trip, it was all kumbaya about Thanksgiving and Native Americans and the Pilgrims. And I really wasn't taught, and the history books have been changed since then, the massacres that took place. And how the white people came to the United States and robbed and murdered Native Americans. And that has been accurately represented. What I also didn't learn, and what I think they want to do with the 1619 Project, which many in the Democratic Party find some elements too radical, what I want, and I think a lot of parents want, regardless of their political leaning, is to have accurate representation of history. For example, black contributions historically, which aren't being taught today, or the consequences and ramifications of slavery, which also are not necessarily being taught today in classrooms and in textbooks. And that needs to be changed.
You know, let's not blanket with just one covering every school district, every school in America, because you have many that have all types of diversity in our history being taught. I mean, I have biracial children. If I didn't think their education was what it should be, I mean, I've had more access to them now during the pandemic, so I can walk upstairs and fill in the gaps. But if I thought it weren't right, I'm going to advocate for what the truth is, because I think that's what you're getting to. But the truth still has to be balanced. Giano, your last quick word on this.
Yeah, many historians have disagreed with the accuracy that's being depicted in the 1619 Project. I've not done a thorough review of it, and I'm sure a lot of folks haven't had that opportunity because there's a lot there. But the history of our country, there's been some abuses. We've seen slavery. We've seen laws that have impacted folks from redlining, housing, individual policies. We get all of that. And I do agree with Leslie's point that we should know about some of the things that African Americans have done, which we didn't necessarily learn when we were younger coming up in school. But the information should be accurate. And it seems as though some of it is politically driven. It's an agenda-driven project, and that's where it becomes problematic for many Americans.
And, you know, I've had parents tell me, as I let you both go, that if you lean too far in one direction and you say America is an evil place inherently, then the children who do not look like us, Giano, feel less than, based on an experience that they don't have with their peers of color. I mean, it is whack. It is out of balance in that sense. They're, going to hate themselves because of history? We've got to find a way to teach it all, and I think parents have to play a big role in this. It's good to see you both. Thank you.